Welcome to this 1-hour training on Science 101, brought to you by the Einstein Project. We're appreciative of your time. We know that you had to, that this is a required training for you, and we appreciate that you are able to view this webinar. We are going to have a few places where you are going to be where you're going to be asked to interact. So please make sure that you are not distracted for the next 45 minutes or so, and you are able to give us the feedback and participate throughout the webinar today as you are directed to. This webinar is being brought to you from the platform of Edpuzzle, and if you are not familiar with Edpuzzle, a couple things. The video will stop at certain points and will ask you to type in an answer or give a feedback of some sort. So again, we want to make sure that you are you don't have any distractions during our time together today. Plus, with Edpuzzle, you're able to pause the video and finish it later. So this will run about 45 minutes or so. And if you don't have that, if you're watching this on a prep time or during lunch and you need to come back to it, you can save where you are and then finish it at a later time. So on that note, what are we going to be doing today? Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who we are, why are you here, and what are some of the next steps for you as a professional in this science education. A little bit about who we are and what we do. So Einstein Project is a nonprofit organization that provides schools with leased science and engineering kits. And we started back in 1991 in a little house there, you can see it on your screen, to be able to provide schools with the best hands-on science. So there were some science teachers, there were some business community members in the Brown County area. They approached the schools and said, what can we do to help you teach science better? And the district administrators and the curriculum directors at the time said, well, first of all, our teachers need quality professional development. And second of all, we need to have affordable materials that we can get the kids doing hands-on science. So the first couple years, we didn't have any real employees. Everybody was a volunteer. And eventually, in like the first three or four years, we ended up growing about 600%. And we ended up moving into a new warehouse and facility. So you'll see here our board of directors. We are a nonprofit, so we don't try to make money off of you. We simply want to be of support and service to you. This is our current location. We've been there almost 10 years, but we are outgrowing that area as well. So I have some exciting news. We are going to be moving to the STEM Innovation Center at UWGB. It's going to be a great partnership with the UW Green Bay Mechanical Engineering Department, as well as Brown County. We will actually have the ability to collaborate and work with the engineer professors and students and actually be able to create something that runs kindergarten, pre-kindergarten, all the way through college as far as engineering goes. So there's a lot of opportunity for us to collaborate and really make a difference within the community. So that leads us to, that's a little bit about who we are. And so take a minute, think about how does effective science instruction facilitate deeper understanding of science. And this is really why you are here. At the end of this webinar, we would like you to have a very firm and solid answer to that question. Like I said earlier, there's a lot of research out there, what we know about how kids learn, how people learn, and best practices in delivering instruction and assessment. Inquiry-based learning fits that mold very well. Now, I also want to take a minute just to address that sometimes when you say inquiry-based learning, it kind of has a negative connotation. And that's probably because the perception is that, well, you're just going to let the kids do whatever they want and learn whatever they want when they want. No, that's not inquiry-based learning. It's really about helping the kids to think and learn that way. And so why? Why is it that we should be teaching kids this way? Why is it that they learn best this way? Well, we can try to prepare them for their future, but that's kind of almost silly, because how do I know what their future looks like? But what we do know is that when today's kindergartners are graduating from high school, they will become more of an independently employed workforce. So they're going to have the skills to be able to learn things on their own and to be able to problem solve and collaborate to be successful. Another reason the future is very global as far as economy. It's not like the agricultural society when my grandma grew up, where you just needed to know what kind of worm to pick out of your crop. Today's students are going to need to know more than that, because it's more than just survival. It's a commerce and businesses throughout the globe, not just within a few miles. So with a global economy, there's a lot more competition, and our students are going to need to know how to communicate with that. So as we continue to move on, we're a more complex society than what we used to be, and with that, we've got more complicated problems. So what we need a future full of thinkers and innovators, and that's really what we want to accomplish with our science instruction in the 21st century classroom. So I'm going to turn it over here to Chad. He is our learning architect, and he's going to share with you how we can get there.
Thanks, Kim. So I want to go back to that question that you guys thought about earlier about effective science instruction and how it can facilitate deeper understanding. If you take the pictures at the bottom of the slide for an example, you see in the first picture a young girl who seems very disinterested in the material that is being covered in class. And I often wonder how many of our classrooms still exist today where students are not highly engaged. We hear teachers talking all the time about trying to get students more engaged in their learning. So much of that comes back to the approaches that we use as instructors. The methodology that works in classrooms to keep students engaged and to facilitate deeper understanding has a ton of research behind it. We can go back years to the reports from the National Academies Press on how students learn, and we know that when we engage students in the act of learning themselves, when we provide them with learning opportunities, they have more buy-in. Rather than just sitting and hearing the teacher talk or reading about it in a textbook, we need to provide students with opportunities where they can actually participate in the learning of science. And so the question then becomes, how exactly do we accomplish that? And so my set of slides here is simply going to present one method, one way of getting this message out about how we can be more effective science instructors and help to engage our students to a level that it actually produces some of that deeper understanding. We start with this idea about the difference between knowing and understanding. As Calvin and Hobbes and his dad, or Calvin and his dad here indicate, we can certainly know a lot without truly understanding anything. Every time Calvin seems to go up to his dad and asks him some sort of question where he's wondering about how something works in the world, his dad, like most, comes up with some highfalutin answer that sounds plausible, but when you look at it in a little more closely, you find out that he really is saying a lot, but he doesn't really make any sense. The understanding can truly be lacking when we expect kids to know a certain amount of information. Knowing is not the same as understanding. So what we need to do is we need to make this transition and make this shift. And you saw this earlier on Kim's slides where she had we need less of this and more of this. The idea is that we need to make a transition into getting students put into the position where they're actually figuring out the science concepts rather than just sitting in their seats and learning about them. The sad reality is some of our kids still come home, parents ask them questions about what they learned in school, nothing. In some cases, it might actually be true. We talked to them a lot about things that are going on, but we never gave them opportunities to engage in the learning process themselves. And so what we want to try to do is we want to present this notion of science instruction where students are highly engaged and they're active participants in their learning process. After all, it's the students themselves that have to make sense out of the ideas. Learning about science is not just about memorizing a whole bunch of facts about how our world and our universe works. It is truly developing a conceptual understanding and helping them to make sense out of how things happen and why things happen the way that they do. What we want to do is we want to start by engaging them. We want to puzzle them with some conundrum that they might find. You take something from the media, for example. You hear this last summer about this guy who was going to launch a rocket to be able to see if not just to see, so as the headline says, so he can prove that the Earth is flat. When students are confronted with ideas that they themselves have no true experience with themselves, they might start to ponder and say, well, gosh, is the Earth really flat? We want to create a puzzling situation that makes them wonder and makes them ask questions. And creating those puzzling situations can be simply looking at news stories, looking at videos where it almost seems like some magic is happening in the video, some chemical reaction or some physics demonstration that just, it puzzles the students and they wonder why exactly things happen the way that they do through those demonstrations. Probably better yet is to let the kids engage firsthand. Give them some sort of learning opportunity where they see the results of an experiment and it leaves them puzzled. It leaves them wondering and asking a whole bunch of questions about why exactly things work the way that they do. Once we've got them engaged, we can then take them deeper and try to make sense out of their ideas. In order to do that, what we've got to do is we've got to get their thinking visible. Having students take an opportunity to jot down some ideas in a science notebook, or as the students are in this case, jotting some ideas down on a whiteboard, it gives them the chance to pull the information that's up here in their heads, and they're committing to it by putting it down on a piece of paper or on a whiteboard, and they're sharing what they think is going on in a certain situation. Now, this could be quite scary for some students because you've all had those kids that just want to be shy and sit in the corner and not share their ideas because they're afraid that their ideas might be wrong. What we have to get students comfortable with is when we develop an understanding of some new idea, we're all going to have misconceptions. There are things that we're all going to get wrong. Even the scientists don't always have all of the right answers. And we need to help them to understand that it's okay to not have a true understanding early on in our learning. As we progress through a unit, we should be able to add pieces to the puzzle and help to make their ideas more concrete and give them something that they can actually support their ideas with. That, of course, is what we call evidence. When students participate in learning activities, they should be gathering evidence that's going to allow them to either support their thinking or confound their thinking and refute it with some data that didn't quite make sense. In this case, the students are doing a simple physics demonstration where they're rolling balls down a ramp. Having them collect the data and gather the information firsthand gives them something that they can then go back to their original thinking and possibly make revisions to it based on the evidence that they gathered during their investigations. I think too often what we have always done in science is that we have, and this is not the inquiry method, we present them information and then we maybe go back and we say, okay, now let's do this experiment on photosynthesis because we just took all these notes and we just learned all about photosynthesis. Now we're going to see that plants actually photosynthesize. Rather than doing it that way, what we should be doing is eliciting students' original ideas. We all have conceptions about how things work, have them commit to their ideas, and then go back to the experiment to see if their ideas actually jive with the way that things really do work in the world. But then we need to give them a comfortable environment where they can share and compare their ideas. Putting students in small group discussions or even whole class discussions gives them an opportunity to share their thinking with others, and it might allow them to hear different points of view. This, of course, is best accomplished when you as the teacher have created an environment that is supportive of student ideas. Whether they're right or wrong, we want students to feel comfortable putting their ideas out there for others. You might have students who join in the conversation and say, well, yeah, I agree with you because, and then they throw in some new ideas. But you might also have students who join in the conversation and say, well, I disagree, and here's why. When we get students talking, we know that they are the ones who are then doing the learning. When the teacher stands in front of the classroom, we hear this all too often, the one who does the talking is the one who really does the learning. We need to get kids engaged in a situation where they are actively discussing the ideas, the concepts, the experiments, all of the things related to the concepts that we are hoping that they learn. Once students have had an opportunity to share with others, they need to go back and they need to reflect on their own ideas. They need to actually page back in their science notebook and look at what they originally thought and try to see if the evidence actually does support what their original thoughts were. Or maybe they came up with some new evidence that conflicts their original thinking. Or maybe it just adds on and changes the direction slightly. But we need to provide the opportunity for students to be able to do that. The idea of being able to just teach something and then take a test on it doesn't allow for this opportunity of growth. In the classroom, we know that this works really well when we do formative assessments, because that acts as a little gauge so that we can see how they are progressing in their depth of understanding. Finally, when students have had the opportunity to go through these learning experiences, we can find out whether or not they truly have developed deeper understanding by giving them opportunities to apply what they have learned. And not just applying it in a pen and paper test. We need to give them meaningful exercises where they can then make a difference in their community and a difference in their world. Project-based learning, inquiry-based learning almost always come back to this idea of how does this actually apply someplace out in the real world, and giving kids the opportunity to take their learning and make a difference is the true definition of whether or not they have developed that deeper understanding. If I go back and reflect on all of these different ideas, what I've done is I've essentially constructed for you an instructional sequence where we first engage the kids, we give them opportunities to get their ideas out, we then let them do some investigations. The learning cycle that I went through was not explicitly based off of the 5E model, but you can certainly see how the 5E instructional model actually fits well. And you could apply any other instructional model or learning cycle to these ideas. The whole idea, though, is that we want to construct learning experiences within our classrooms that are conducive for students making sense of ideas. And by giving them specific opportunities to engage, have discussions, do explorations, what we're creating is we're creating the environment where they can make sense out of ideas. It's not just about pulling out the textbook and memorizing a certain set of vocabulary words. It's about being able to use them in a context where we actually understand them, and then to be able to turn back into our community or back out into our school and actually apply those ideas in some meaningful way. This instructional model is one of many, but you can easily see how the lessons in an inquiry-based or a learning cycle that facilitates this deeper understanding, how that supports deeper learning for students. One of the other things that I think about when I look at those learning cycles is I think about the science and engineering practices of the next generation science standards. Here in Wisconsin, we haven't officially adopted the next generation science standards. What we did instead was we wrote our own set of standards, which essentially copied and pasted a whole bunch of information from NGSS. But it still says that we're going to ask kids to learn using these three different dimensions. The science and engineering practices are the ways in which the students are going to engage with the learning process itself. If I go back and look at those previous slides, I can see all different ways that students engage in meaningful practice that the scientists and engineers themselves would use. That's why they're called the practices. They use them in a series so that they can progressively get better at them, starting from the early childhood classes all the way up through their high school courses. They should be adding on and developing those skills. They use them in an effort to be able to engage with the disciplinary core ideas. The disciplinary core ideas are the content, the concepts that we want the students to walk away with. And so when we use three dimensions in the science classroom, it presents a really rich environment that gives students the opportunity to construct deeper meaning. The next generation science standards are just one tool in the belt of educators to be able to help students make sense out of this world. If you want to learn more about the next generation science standards, we've included for you a handout that has all of the science and engineering practices, the disciplinary core ideas, and the cross-cutting concepts. It's a nice one-page reference, front and back, that you could laminate and keep handy, because having students engage in those science and engineering practices is the method by which we are going to develop that deeper understanding. Using the cross-cutting concepts as these big overarching ideas is going to help us to cut through all different disciplines of science and make sense out of these big thematic ideas. And then the disciplinary core ideas, they act as our foundation. Those are the actual concepts that we want students to be able to walk away with. What we see with the next generation science standards and our Wisconsin science standards is that we are trying to cut down the amount of information that students are expected to know. And what we're trying to do is to develop deeper understanding of fewer concepts by using methods that are well-designed, well thought out, that are written into the curriculum. There's all sorts of opportunities to help students create deeper understanding. Putting a Bill Nye video on, or possibly even just giving students a textbook reading assignment, is not going to create those same types of learning within our students. They're going to skim across the surface, they're probably going to have seen a YouTube video on it, and they're just going to have a little bit of knowledge of a whole bunch of ideas, rather than developing that deeper understanding. When we look at the next generation science standards, in its simplistic concepts, what we see is that there are three different strands, the three different dimensions of the next generation, but they need to be twisted together. They need to be intertwined in order to give students those rich learning opportunities. And when we do that, we can construct performance expectations that are going to allow our students to demonstrate true understanding of their science concepts. They use all three together, intertwined like the pieces of a rope. When we look at Wisconsin science standards, what we can see is that in the text of the standard itself, the students are being asked to use the science and engineering practices together with the cross-cutting concepts and the understanding of bleh. It's an underlined portion. That underlined portion represents the disciplinary core idea. And within our Wisconsin science standards, the wording on every single one of these standards is the same. The students are going to use the science and engineering practices. They're going to couple them together with the cross-cutting concepts as well as the disciplinary core idea, and they're going to make sense out of phenomenon and solve problems. This is the true application of whether or not students understand information or not. Can they make sense of what's going on in our world, and can they apply that understanding to be able to solve problems? The next generation science standards and Wisconsin science standards are not just documents that are there for us to measure student performance on some standardized test and to compare students against each other, to compare schools against each other. What they are is a set of information that are based off of research that shows that this is how learning in science takes place. And this is what we want to strive for when we are trying to make super science teachers out of all of our Einstein educators. We want you to be able to engage them deeply and to help them construct that deeper meaning for themselves. So now, as we pause for another reflection, I've got a couple of questions that I would like you to think about. Think back on the ways that you're already helping students to make sense of ideas. What things are you already doing where you give them the opportunity to truly reflect and to truly grapple with ideas and communicate their understanding with other students? But then I'd also like you to think about the other ways that you might want to change your instruction to better support student sense making. And I now turn it back over to Kim so that she can tell you about some of the next steps.
All right. So Chad, you've done that was awesome. You have hit the nail right on the head with how we want to prepare our students. And we know that this is good teaching. Applying this information to any material, whether it's a science or social studies or even math. I mean, the inquiry best practice in instructional delivery is a very powerful way for students to get that deeper understanding. So you have your kit, right? And what are your next steps? So you've unpacked your tote. These totes, if your students have used Einstein kits before, they will recognize them, and you will have a very hard time getting your kids not get excited. They want to know what's in that, and they know that when these totes arrive, that there's going to be stuff that's fun and engaging. So don't be afraid of it. And we know that you have time constraints. We know that maybe you don't teach science every single day. You have to fit it in. But one thing we want you to really try hard to do is to use the materials to their fidelity. The Smithsonian Science Education Center is phenomenal with how they put together their curriculum. And although some of the curriculum you have right now is a little outdated, it's still very valuable and it's research-based. So if you follow the materials to fidelity as close as possible, try not to skip any lessons, it will benefit your students. We have researched in our studies that we've done here through Einstein since 2007 that proves that it does work. Students do perform better on their state assessments in when they utilize an Einstein kit. And don't settle for, oh my gosh, I have 30 minutes. I'm just going to tell them what they need to know. It's not going to work. It's not the best way to do things. So really be patient, be persistent, and push your students to think by following the curriculum as it's written. A couple things logistically wise with your kits. Your tote is leased, which means that when you receive it, there's an inventory sheet in your kit, and you want to make sure that you take the time to see that everything is included in it. One of the things being a nonprofit, we work with a lot of volunteer groups that come in here that help us pack the kits and clean the materials and then get them back ready to be sent to you. So you want to make sure that you've received everything you need. The consumable versus non-consumable. Again, here's how we're a little different than your typical science curriculum. We have materials that we expect to come back. And those materials, like the plastic bins or the magnifying glasses, those are non-consumables, which means they can be cleaned, refurbished, and repacked to be used by someone else. So that makes your kit affordable. There are some things in your kit we don't expect to get back. We would not like your dirty microscope slides or your cups that you use that are not able to be reused. So please pay attention to that. We want to make sure that you are returning the non-consumable materials. And when you do that, you do keep your kit costs low so we don't have to purchase more. The other thing I want to point out to you is that in your teacher's guide, in the materials section, there is a page that at the top it says needed but not supplied items. We've tried really hard to make this kit an easy button for you as the teacher. It should have everything you need in it for 30 students. However, there are some things that are on your regular school supply list that you will have to supply, like crayons and markers, or maybe even paper, drawing paper or graph paper. For a few of our kits, especially the ones that deal with living organisms, there are things you may need to provide on your own. For example, you may need to start collecting 2-liter soda bottles so that you have enough of those for when your kit arrives. Or maybe you need to start put out an all call to your families through school and have them start saving shoe boxes because you're going to make a model home and you're going to do the electrical circuitry for it. So make sure that you double check that needed but not supplied information in your teacher's manual when you get your kit. Another thing I just thought of is if you are getting a living materials kit in the spring, you're going to want to collect some of the fall stuff now. And we will send you an email just reminding you of the need to do that. But make sure that you are looking at that information and that you are getting our emails, because we will send you emails to let you know when your living organisms are coming. We'll also send emails to kind of remind you, hey, your kit's due in 2 weeks, wrap up your instruction or do what you can for that. So that's the nitty-gritty of the kits. But now, Chad, I'm going to put it back to you to just talk about the next steps. What are some of the other things that we have that you that'll help teachers in the classroom do a good job with what they're doing?
Sure thing. One of the things that I wanted to share with you yet before our time is up is the educator portal that we have online. As Kim said, we're trying to make this as easy as possible for you as the classroom teacher. And we have collected a whole bunch of different resources that go along with each of the units that we have provided for you. Most of those resources are housed on our educator portal. This is also the place where you are going to be able to go to sign up for your units for next year. We usually open that sometime in the spring, March or April. You'll get an email notifying you when the catalog is open, and you'll probably want to try to place your orders before the end of the school year. That's going to help ensure that kits are reserved in your name and that they're going to come in a timely fashion when the school year starts. So let's just walk through a few of those steps. Right up here we see where the unit catalog is located. You can also see links up here in the top bar for our science units, our engineering units, our maker kits, as well as our new math kit. You could also click on it right down here where it says unit catalog. That's going to present us with those same options. I'm going to jump in and take a peek at the science units. And let's jump into grades 1 and 2. They're all organized by grade level. One of the things you'll notice is that some of our units are going to be retiring soon. That's one of the exciting things that we have going on here at the Einstein Project, is that we are in the process of replacing some of our older curriculum. We will be piloting new units again this year and sending some resources out to schools to try things for the first time, to see how they work in the classroom. And as we get feedback, we'll be adopting new units and replacing some of the older titles. Let's go in to check the life cycle of the butterflies to see if there are any of those still available. So when you want to place your unit, you end up with this screen that gives you the details about the unit. It tells you how many totes there are, if it's a semester or trimester, what science concept. Oh, and you can also see that this kit does include living material. One of the first things that I recommend is that teachers check to see if there are still units available before they choose a cycle. If I just go up here to choose a cycle, it's going to give me the options, but it's not going to tell me if there are actually any units available. I'm hoping to be able to teach this in the spring, and so that's going to be the 3rd trimester. So if I click on View Availability, I can see that there's still 6 of them available in the spring. That's good, so I can go ahead and place that order. As you can see, not many people do the butterfly unit during the winter. So now that I saw that there's still a unit available, I can come down and choose that 3rd trimester. You can see the shipping dates on here. This is when it's going to leave and head to your classroom, and this is when it's due back. Next thing I'll do is I'll click on Request a Unit. And then we're just about ready. The only thing we have left is to review the terms and conditions and agree to those terms and conditions. As with all terms and conditions, you need to read the fine details. We talk in here about some of the things with pricing and shipping, as well as training requirements, as well as living materials, if there's missing and damaged items when it gets returned to us, as well as what happens when you have a late order or a late return or a unit cancellation. Once you've read through all of those, put a check mark in the box, and then you'll click the blue button to confirm your unit request. In this case, I'm going to cancel it just so I can head back. You should get an email right away confirming your unit with some of the details, such as the shipping dates. If for some reason you're not receiving emails from us, sometimes the schools end up having a tight spam filter, and we end up in the spam box. So double check that before you give us a call. But otherwise, if you ever don't receive some information, you think you placed a unit, just feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email, and we'd be happy to help you out. All right, the next thing I want to show you are the educator resources. Down here in this bottom quadrant, we have our newsletters all posted online, but probably more importantly are the unit resources. Now these go along with every single one of the units that we have. However, we don't have training videos available for all of them. So we've got the list here. These are tips and tricks. We no longer require a unit-specific training for our teachers, but teachers very often have lots of questions about, well, how do I get this ready so that these when these living materials arrive, I know what to do with them. These videos are the tips and tricks that are going to help you get through running your unit for the first or second time, or maybe it's been a few years since you've taught a certain unit. Over on the right-hand side, we see a list of all of the units here, and we're going to jump into one and look at a couple of the things that are in there. So you can see that there are notices. That's going to include some of the shipping dates so that you can see when your living materials are going to show up. You've got curriculum and lesson planning ideas. We're going to go into there in just a second. Extensions, technology resources, and care sheets for those living organisms. I'm going to jump back here to the curriculum because after talking about NGSS, I want to show you one of the great resources that was put together by the Smithsonian to help with some of their older units that were designed before the next generation science standards came out. One of the things you'll notice as I'm scrolling through here is that there are copies of all of the Blackline Masters that the students will need. This can save you a bit of legwork so that you don't have to take your sheets down to the copy room. You can actually send them straight from your computer down to your copier. There are Spanish resources available for most of our units, as well as the Spanish editions of the textbooks should all be on here as well. Down here, you're going to notice that there's a curriculum guide. It should be located right near something that says NGSS. This is just a list of the standards. This curriculum guide gives you a whole lot more details. When you jump into that curriculum guide, what you're going to see is how Carolina Biological, the publisher, and the Smithsonian have gone back and looked over each of these older units with a fine-tooth comb to try to figure out how they can align them with the next generation science standards. Here is just a list of the units, and they tell you which of the standards they align with. But as you scroll down here, we're going to jump into one of the lessons. You can actually see where they have identified the cross-cutting concepts, the science and engineering practices, and the disciplinary core ideas for each of the different lessons that the teacher would go through. And so you can see guiding questions, learning objectives, materials. It gives you literacy ideas. digital resources that are available online, as well as some additional assessment strategies. This PDF is always available to you, so that you could even download a copy of it and begin preparing for a unit that you've maybe never taught before. So again, that's on the resources page, and it's listed under curriculum guide. And one of the final things that's on our educator portal is our professional development. Kim's going to talk a little bit about some of the other professional development opportunities that are coming up, but let me just jump in here real quick and show you that there are links. This is where you're going to sign up for additional professional development. We're hoping that this webinar just gives you a taste of some of what we have to offer. We would love to have you join us for some of these other sessions that Kim is going to talk about.
So the portal is full of a wealth of information. And as a classroom teacher, to be able to access that before your kit even arrives, I think is a great way to kind of put your mind at ease if you're a little anxious about teaching science. You can prepare. You don't have to wait for the totes to arrive to start getting your head into what the materials are going to be. So as Chad said, the other part of the portal is the professional development. And you'll find that there are the required trainings, which are our Science 101. If you're going to use any of our science kits, completing this webinar is your ticket. However, we hope you don't stop there. There are other ways you can improve and seek improvement for your instructional delivery using some of the workshops that we have. And on the screen here, you're seeing that one of the new professional development series we're going to roll out is the Einstein Online. And what that will be is that's going to be a 1-hour free webinar. Yes, I said free, you don't have to pay for it, but we do want you to register for it so we know how to send you the links. These are going to be based on specific instructional strategies or assessment methods, that kind of thing that will help support your instructional delivery. So we'll be running those once a month starting in October. So keep your eyes open for that. You'll get some information in your educator newsletter at the end of September that will have the dates and times on it for you. Another new service that we're providing, another new product we're providing for you, are maker kits. And Dennis Rockhill is our coordinator for that. He has developed some of the coolest maker kits. These are not a leased product, these are purchased. So we will be getting our online catalog up very soon to give you an idea. But you can see in the picture here that you would get a packet or a kit full of the materials you would need to build this really cool boat that's going to work on a propeller. So keep your eyes, if you have a maker space in your school or if you're interested in dabbling in it, you can come to us, and Dennis would be happy to help with whatever he can, or you can purchase some of those kits. Coming up, and when I say coming up, I mean probably after Christmas, maybe January, hopefully for sure by the end of, by next summer, we will have technology kits available. We received a sizable grant from Microsoft to provide some of the foundation work for developing these technology kits. And the vision for this project is that you would lease a kit that would come with instructional tools, technology tools, to teach concepts to your students, and you would lease it. So when you're done with it, maybe you'd lease it for a month, and it would get delivered to you, it'll get picked back up, and we'll take care of that. And in those kits will be everything you need for 30 students. So maybe there'll be 30 circuit boards and the lesson plans and the curriculum that will walk you through being able to deliver the instruction that way. We're excited about this opportunity because we know that investing in technology is a huge financial commitment. And there are just some schools today who don't have the means to do that. So as a nonprofit, we want to be able to support you by helping you with the materials, but taking away the maintenance and the upkeep that you might have to do if you were to purchase the materials yourself. And finally, as a professional, I'm always looking at ways to improve my performance in the classroom. So I'm going to throw this out there for you. I'd like to do a book study. And if there's any of you out there who would like to join me in that book study, send me an email and we can get one going. We could do it in person, we could do it virtually, but always having a good professional book to refer back to is powerful. We also know that the research out there on professional development typically shows that when an educator engages in professional development that's ongoing and in short chunks where you have time in between to do a little reflecting, that it actually helps improve your delivery, which ultimately improves your students' learning. So if you're interested in doing a book study, let me know what title you want to do. We'll see what we can do. Or if there's any other interests in professional development topics, please let us know. And finally, we are active in the community. So our first love is the classroom. Chad and I were both classroom teachers for over 18 years. And we know that the future, the impact you have as an educator on your students is profound. And we as an organization want to bring that awareness of STEM education to the community. And we do this through a couple community-wide events that we find sponsors for and provide to the public. So our STEM Summit is a one-day event at the Widener Center. It takes place in November this year. Excuse me. It is a free event for you to participate in. We're looking at the topics of diversity and computer science. And so what are we doing to attract and retain diverse STEM educators, as well as what are we doing for the diverse learners in our classrooms for computer science and hands-on science opportunities. So that's the STEM Summit. Einstein Expo, we're going on our 18th year for this community-wide event. There's over 4,000 people that attend the event at Shopko Hall. There is a slight charge for it, but if you're looking for something to do that's fun with your kiddos or your nieces or nephews or grandkids, February 2nd is a phenomenal opportunity to go through different booths and see how the different organizations and businesses in the Brown County area utilize STEM in their everyday operations. So that's a really cool event that's been happening for a long time. And finally, the STEAM Fair. The STEAM Fair was launched last year. And what that is that is a day for students to be on the stage. This is all about showcasing what you know, what you've learned as a child or as a student about STEM. Exciting for us to be part of the Einstein Project. And we look forward to continuing to support you in the classroom with your science endeavors this year. Chad, any final thoughts?
No, be ambitious.
Be ambitious. Thank you again for taking the time to complete this webinar. Hope you have a great year. Please check back on the portal for other upcoming workshops and information. And as always, we're here to support you. So feel free to email Chad or I and contact us here at the Einstein Project if there's any ideas you have or things that we can help you with.